study. It's kind of seeing this idea of forgiveness, and that basically there's two main ideas with forgiveness. There's the first idea of sending it away and basically acting as if it didn't happen from a standpoint of justice. And God is the righteous judge. God is the only one who can forgive sin. And this is the idea of transferring responsibility onto one and sending it away. And that's the teaching that they used in the Old Testament on the Day of Atonement with Israel and the scapegoat idea. Again, we talked through that last week and the week before about what God was trying to teach these folks. He was trying to teach them that when sin happens, something has to die. He also wanted to teach them that sacrifice needed to be without blemish. It needed to be without spot. It needed to be a worthy sacrifice. He also showed them that you may not be the one who dies, that sometimes that guilt is transferred and someone else has to die. And so these are the things that we saw with this idea of sending away sin. And today we want to look at the other word. We want to look at the other idea. And our lesson has to do with this idea of pardon. And I'm just going to tell you where we're going to go. I don't know if we're going to be able to get it all done in the next half an hour or so. We're going to take a look at this idea of seeking pardon, of knowing that you've done something wrong and trying to beg someone's pardon. And then this idea of granting pardon. And whereas none of us in the room were in a position to send away somebody's sin, to forgive sins, and to not hold them accountable, everyone in this room has the ability to grant pardon for wrongs that were done against you personally. And so this is the focus that we have now. We're not talking about the stain, for instance, the blood that cried to God from the ground when Cain killed Abel. And that offense was done against the creator of the universe and the morality of right and wrong. Justice was affronted and God needed to seek justice. No, again, He's the only one who can forgive sins in that way. What we're talking about is when someone commits an offense against you. And so we're going to take a look at seeking pardon, granting pardon, and then we're going to look at basically why. Two of the reasons why it's important, both for the one seeking pardon and the one granting pardon, to be able to blot out this offense as if this offense never took place. So this is the idea. So let's dig in here. So we have this concept of seeking pardon, relies on the idea of authority. Pardon means that an individual is fully forgiven from all the legal consequences of his or her crime or conviction. Think of pardon, right? Who is the one, you're watching your favorite crime drama, right? And some innocent person is on death row and his lawyer and the family are trying to seek clemency or get someone to grant pardon so they can prove innocence. Who's this person that they need to get to grant pardon? It's the governor, right? So usually murder is a state crime, and the only one with authority in that state to grant pardon or clemency is the one with the authorities, that governor, right? Sometimes it's the President of the United States. We hear at the end of a president's term all these pardons that have been signed, right? Either by someone's actual hand or an auto pen, right? That's a new thing now. But the president can grant pardon. What I didn't realize until just recently is that you can grant someone pardon for a crime that they've never been accused of. Now that was kind of interesting. You can grant somebody a pardon for any future crimes they might. So you can grant somebody's family. Well, never mind. We're going to politics. I don't want to dig into that too much. But so this idea of seeking pardon, right? A pardon fully restores civil rights that are lost as a result of a conviction. So one might receive a pardon from a president on a federal level or a governor on a state level. These are the individuals, the president and the governor, who have the authority to grant pardon for crimes committed against the state or the country. So let's bring that now down to an individual level. All right, you bump into somebody, and what's something we say? Ooh, pardon me, right? Or excuse me, right? We give this idea. This comes from an archaic phrase, to cry one's pardon. And this simply means to ask for excuse or forgiveness for a fault, a discourtesy, or an offense that's committed from one person to another. And so this is the concept we want to zero in on today. This idea of personal responsibility when I cut you off in traffic, or I step in front of you in the door, or I brush by you and I step on your foot, and I've committed an offense. I've committed a discourtesy, and I say, will you please pardon me? Now, that is something we do for accidents. What happens when what I've done has more serious consequences? What happens when something I've done, I make a decision and it hurts you or hurts a member of your family? When I commit a sin and now I've directed an unrighteous act that I need to get forgiveness from God, but I also need to seek your pardon. I also need to get forgiveness from you individually. So this is the concept that we're talking about here. So our focus now focuses on this ability or authority to grant pardon for an offense against an individual. And we need to remember that we all have this ability. We all have this authority. It's important that you recognize that authority that you have, because some people will say, well, I don't like to get caught up in that. I don't like to, I avoid all conflict. And so you act like the conversation doesn't need to take place. And that's a problem too, because one day you're not going to feel that way. One day things are going to have built up and built up and built up and built up, and you're going to just go off on somebody. And all these things that you've been harboring are going to come out. And you're going to shock yourself at realizing, I didn't even know that bothered me. But it does, to the point where now I'm going to let you have it, right? And I'm going to talk about anything and everything from the beginning of time. And this person is like, what in the world just happened, right? So I think we need to understand that everyone has this authority. Everyone has this ability. The Hebrew words that deal with this concept are salak and kafar. Salach. The Greek word is charizomai. And so we're going to be looking at some of the scriptures that take care of these things. Let's go to Colossians chapter 2, and I want to show you something, because this is the basis upon which we're going to look at personal forgiveness. The believer has been pardoned. The word we're going to be looking at now is our word charizomai. The believer has been pardoned all of his sins, past, present, future. That happened at the moment of salvation. God is not holding the believer accountable for any of his offenses towards God. In fact, when the Father looks at your ledger, or when he beholds you, he sees you basically the way he sees his Son. And we use a phrase around here, you were able to exchange resumes with the Son. Everything that you've ever done, Jesus took to the cross. And what was left on your account is all the righteous acts that Jesus has done. We read in a passage in Corinthians which said that all the ordinances that the principalities hold against you, Jesus took care of those, nailing them to his cross. Right? He triumphed over them openly. And so we see this picture in heaven where the accuser, or one of the demons, his fallen angels, shouts you down. And he says, this man, Steve, he lost his temper. You know, he kicked his dog. And they talk about what a bad person I am. And the Son of God says, he shows the nail prints in his hand and he says, I took care of that. Innocent. He's not guilty. And so he triumphs in this open court, showing that I am righteous. Now, anybody follows me around, if you saw me kick my dog or shout at my wife, or kick my wife and shout at my dog, whatever happened, right? All those bad things, you know that I am not a righteous person, that I have to take care of sin from time to time, then we all do. And so that kind of brings it down to this level. But let's take a look at this verse. Colossians 3, Colossians chapter 2, verse 13 says, and you being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. In fact, this is the passage I was just referring to, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross, and having spoiled principalities and powers, made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. So not Corinthians, but Colossians. Take a look at chapter 3, verse 13, and we see the same idea. Paul tells believers in verse 12, put on therefore as the elect of God, holy and beloved. Again, this is this idea of holy. We're chosen, holy, and loved of God. In what sense are you and I holy? We walk around with our hands folded and we wear nice clothes and we sing Gregorian chants. And is that the way in which you and I are holy? No, we're holy in the very way that I just told you we're holy. That God has set us apart. He's given us a righteous ledger. He's made us blameless. Right? We are loved. We are holy. We are chosen of God. And so Paul says, those of you who are seen in the heavenlies this way, here's how you need to act on earth. Put that garment on when you're here on earth. Put those things on. Put on bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you. Again, here's our word, charizomai. This is our word. It's been blotted out, right? You've been granted favor, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. So this is important. This is the basis upon which we are going to grant pardon to others. It's upon the basis of which we have been granted pardon. And so we've already talked a little bit that describes how we've been granted pardon, right? God the Father looks at us as if we did not. He treats us as if we were His Son. He treats us with the favor of one that was obedient in every sense and went to the cross at the behest of the Father. And that's how the Father treats you and I. That's the favor that He shows us. So I want you to keep that in mind, okay? You could probably say Ephesians 4:32 with me. Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. So again, we have this forgiveness as a present possession. God is not holding the believer accountable for any of his offenses towards God. The moment he was regenerated at salvation, we were granted pardon from trespasses and sins, past, present, and future. Now we're going to talk a little bit about this time factor, because this time factor shows up in 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea of the time factor with forgiveness next week. In the next lesson, I should say that. I don't know if we're going to get through this whole lesson in one night. But the next lesson is, do we have to ask God for forgiveness? That's the concept of the third lesson. And so there is a time factor involved in. We've already been granted this clemency. We've already seen it, right? Forgiveness for sins past, present, and future. But do you have to ask God for forgiveness when you sin? So we'll talk about that in the next lesson. But let's move along here. Colossians 2, again, Paul gives this picture of ordinances against us that Christ's atonement blotted out, nailing them to his cross. No pardon, and this is why I bring it back and I say, you can't just act like this event didn't happen. You can't say, I don't want to have the conversation. Because every pardon carries with it a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice that someone needs to make. And you need to think about that. There is weight. You can't just, on the way home, I lose my temper, and on my long commute home, I hit the maroon Yukon that's between here and my house, all right? I hit Lisa's truck. Well, as forgiving as Lisa and Dennis might be, they can't just ignore the fact that it happened. There needs to be an uncomfortable conversation, right? I would say, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, we'll pay the deductible, whatever needs to be done. There needs to be an answer. Lisa can't just say, well, I don't want to have that conversation with Pastor Steve. No, there has to be an acknowledgement. Again, if there's weight, there is a pardon that has not been granted at that point. There's a weight that needs to be transferred. Now, I want you to understand that. When one grants pardon, it's not without weight. Now, these weights differ, of course, based upon the size and the level of the offense, but I want you to keep that in mind. You can't just not have the conversation. All right, let's turn it around. Let's talk about granting pardon. Granting pardon to someone is an intentional choice. It's choosing to blot out the offense that one has committed against you, and it has benefits both for the one who's seeking pardon and for the one who's granting pardon. I want us to see that this is a two-way street, and there are benefits to be held on both sides. When one side acts like it never happened and says, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to have that conversation, the weight remains. Because the offense didn't go away. The offense is still there. All right? They have not made a decision to deal with it. It's still there. So the weight of that, they may be in that place over in Africa, northern Africa, right? In Egypt, denial. They may be in that state of denial, but it's still there. And it's going to cause problems. We got a dog that likes to run around in the woods, right? Well, what's something that happens to dogs when they spend too much time in the woods? They get these little things called ticks, right? And so when your dog gets a tick, you usually only find out about it when it's gotten fat, right? And why is it fat? Well, because it's got its little head in there and it's been sucking blood out of your dog. So you try to get it out, but when you try to get rid of that, sometimes you separate the body from the head, right? And you have to keep an eye on that going forward, because what happens sometimes with that part of the bug that's left in the animal, it can cause disease. It can cause Lyme disease. It can cause problems. If you don't see that it gets make sure it doesn't get infected, you have to keep, let's take this back. If I don't grant pardon and that weight stays here and I act like it didn't happen and I don't take care of it the way it's supposed to with medicine and making sure it's not infected, then emotionally, spiritually, and even physically it could cause problems with me. I have to make sure it's addressed and addressed properly. It has to be dealt with the way it's supposed to. So releasing one of an obligation shifts that obligation somewhere else. All right? So if I go to Lisa and Dennis and I say, I lost my temper, lead foot, whatever happened, and Lisa says, Steve, I forgive you. She has made the decision to blot out my transgression. Now that weight went somewhere. According to Colossians 2, Colossians 3, and Ephesians 4, she basically transferred that weight to the person who forgave her. The person who's going to help her carry that weight. That thing has been taken care of. And it's been taken care of the same way that her transgressions were taken care of. She said, God's big enough. When you grant someone pardon, when you say you're forgiven, with the right spirit, you're taking the weight off the person who did it. You're not choosing to carry it yourself. You're saying, I have a God that's big enough to carry this weight for both of us. That's the decision that you're making. And so that is the way healing takes place. Because sometimes I say I forgive somebody, but it's just because I'm avoiding that conflict and I keep the weight on myself. And it turns into what? It turns into a root of bitterness. And so I hold that grudge. And I'm not willing to let that weight be carried by the person who's carrying my weight for me. I am holding, Lisa says, I loved that truck. That was my favorite truck ever. Right? and it had seat warmers. Now my seat warmers don't work. When I get in and ride in my car, I got to be cold, and that's all Steve's fault. Now, of course, Lisa, she's too nice. She says, oh, don't worry about it. But she carries that weight around, and it keeps her up at night. He's such a bad driver. I can't believe he wrecked my car, right? Now, I'm being silly, but this is what we do, right? We relive this injustice that was done to us by someone else. We may have said the polite thing, but we haven't transferred that weight. We haven't let it go. We haven't set it and let it drift, right? Casting all your cares upon him, for he careth for you. Right? This is what we're supposed to do. All right? I need to make sure that weight gets carried down. Go to Matthew chapter 18. This is a passage that we're familiar with, but I want to show you a couple things. We are going to point out that there is distinction in the time of the Gospels and in the dispensation of grace. There's a dispensational distinction about forgiveness, and we'll talk about what's different. But we learn a principle here in this passage. Verse 21 of Matthew chapter 18, Peter talks to Christ and he says, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And so Jesus says, well, multiply that times 70 and you'll be closer to the truth. And then he tells them a story in verse 23. He tells them this story of a certain king that took account of his servants, and when he'd begun to reckon, one was brought to him which owed him 10,000 talents. Now, I think God chose this amount, this 10,000 talents. This is literally millions of dollars. This is tens of millions of dollars. I don't know how somebody can owe somebody else tens of millions of dollars. Who lets you borrow tens of millions of dollars? I guess in some circles it happens, right? Commercial real estate or whatever, I don't know. College football, I guess they're doing that now. Tens of millions, they're paying kids to play sports, right? And so he couldn't pay. Verse 25, the Lord commanded him to be sold, his wife, his children, and payment to be made. So let's sell his family into servitude, and they can work off the debt. Verse 27, the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion and loosed him and forgave him of the debt. Now this is actually our other word. This is our word of sending something away, right? And he had the authority as the Lord to send his debt away. This is our different word in the New Testament. It's not charizomai, it's aphemi. We're going to talk about this later. But the same servant went out, found one of his servants, which owed him 100 pence. This is about $20. All right, so that's the difference. He was forgiven a debt of tens of millions of dollars, and then he was forgiven his debt. And what did he do on the first day of his freedom? He went up and beat up a servant who owed him $20 and said, give me my money, and did not show the same level of compassion. I can't even say the same level of compassion. Didn't even show a fraction of the same forgiveness to this guy who owed him $20 that he was shown. He wouldn't even transfer a fraction of that weight, right? But I want you to understand, who took the weight of the original $10 million debt? Well, the king did. The king said, I'll take the hit. I'll take the loss on my ledger. And so the weight was transferred from the one forgiven to the one who forgave. So that weight was still there. The king still had to deal with the $10 million loss, right? That money just didn't automatically show up. He had to deal with the weight of that pardon, of that clemency. And so the servant who wouldn't allow a transfer of $20, when the king found out, he rescinded his grace, he rescinded his mercy, grabbed that guy and threw him in prison. And so there is another principle. We're going to come back here in lesson 4 when we look at the distinction between forgiveness under law and forgiveness under grace. We're going to come back here and talk about this idea about conditional forgiveness. But this again tells the story that there is a transfer of weight that takes place. And I wanted you to see that that weight has to follow somewhere. That's important that we understand that. Again, we just can't act like it doesn't exist. The Ephesians passage that we've already looked at said that we should forgive as we have been forgiven. The weight of that pardon fell on Christ, and he bore a weight that was unbearable. He not only bore our weight, but he bore the weight of the sins of the world. That's something that he carried. He carried it willingly. All right? God now asks you and I to do something similar. Ephesians 4:32, forgive as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. Now that's an important addition there. All right? God, let it be known that God just didn't snap his fingers and eliminate that weight from existence. What happened to it? It got transferred to Christ. Someone bore it. Someone took care of it. And that, I think, is what helps me understand when I have to release someone else. When I have to release someone else of an offense. It's not just the fact that I was forgiven. Because sometimes it's easy to say, don't worry about it. I forgive you. If I'm talking about someone else's money, or I'm talking about, I didn't want that piece of cake anyways. You took the last piece of cake? Well, I had my cake yesterday. I'm fine, right? But it's when I've been thinking about that piece of cake all day long. And I go to the fridge and someone has eaten it. Or even worse, someone thought it was going to spoil and threw it away. Oh, that makes me so angry, right? She loves to throw stuff away. And I'm like, it was fine. She goes, that cake was old. It's been in there a week. I'm like, I've been thinking about that all day long. I can't believe you threw it away. I actually probably could have lived with the fact that she enjoyed it, because at least someone got enjoyment out of it, but she threw it in the trash can. Right? I'm the one. See, there's always someone in your family who thinks expiration dates are just guiding lights, right? They're just, they're not laws. It's just a guide, right? And then there's someone who believes that the moment you go over it, you're going to get a horrible disease and die. And then God has those two people marry each other, right? That's what he does. He brings those two people together. And so, again, the transferred weight of these offenses comes back now to the one who has been offended. And that's what I want you to remember. God will enable that one to carry the weight, because now we come back to this idea of agape love, sacrificial love. Because we have been given the capacity to love the way Jesus loves. And that carries with it a supernatural power that we didn't possess before. This carries with it the ability to have peace or joy in the middle of adverse circumstances. Right? That's counterintuitive. You're not supposed to experience joy. You're not supposed to experience peace when things are going bad. That's when you freak out. That's when you get angry. That's when you have anxiety. But no, Jesus was at peace sleeping in the boat in the middle of the storm. This is the peace that he wants us to have. All right? He's the one who according to Hebrews, right? He went to the cross, despising the shame, right? And he said, I want you to have my joy and I want it to be full in you. So this love is a supernatural love that is able to carry a weight that is unbearable. Because I get asked this all the time. So you're just supposed to let somebody walk all over you? So you're just supposed to just lay yourself out and let someone just abuse you? Wasn't that what our Savior did? So again, I'm not saying that you deliberately, if someone is showing a propensity for danger, that you just put your family in harm's way. That's not what I'm talking about. But if this person has hurt me and I need to act like it never happened, I need to extend sacrificial love to this person. I need to trust that the one who's carrying my weight is strong enough to carry their weight as well. And it takes the load off of your shoulders. Because I've also been told this, Steve, I don't know if I could do that. If someone hurt one of my kids, I don't know if I could forgive them. Well, you don't have to carry that weight by yourself. Because nobody can do to you what you have already done to God and been forgiven for. No one can do that much to you. Because at some level, I deserve every bad thing that happens to me. And so do my kids. On some level. Right? Jesus didn't deserve what he was given. He didn't deserve what I did to him. He bore my weight, being the only one who didn't deserve it. Nobody can do that, even if they attacked me and my family. That's not worse than I've already done to God and been forgiven for. It can't be. Because on some level, we deserve everything that comes our way because of our sin. And I think it's the one who says, Steve, I don't think I could do that. You're holding on to something. You don't have an accurate picture of what you've done to God and been forgiven for yet. You're carrying a measure of pride that says you're entitled to something you're not entitled to. You've been granted every blessing, every breath that you take is a merciful act of God. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll put yourself on the same seat as that offender. And you'll say, I'm just as bad as he is. And yet I've already been granted clemency. I've already been granted pardon for this. And it is on that basis that I need to grant pardon to other people. Again, we read it in Colossians. We read it in Ephesians. This is the passage. And so that's a hard pill to swallow. It's easier now than on the other side of the unrighteousness, right? If you've ever been treated unjustly, that's when it's a really hard pill to swallow. Because I'm convinced. That's what bitterness does. It convinces you that it's your friend. You need me, is what bitterness says. We carry it around in this little box, right? We keep it safe. It whispers in our ear, right? And all the time, it's eating at us. It's hurting us. But it tells you, you need me. We're entitled to this. Don't give me up. You need to be angry. You need to be upset at that person. It'll make you feel better. When it's killing you, when it's hurting you, it's destroying you. And so we're going to stop there and we're going to pick it up. We're going to take a look at John, this idea of agape love. We'll break there and we'll pick it up. And then I want us to see why. I told you what you need to do, but I didn't tell you why. I told you that it carries benefits, and we're going to take a look at the benefits of what this forgiveness does. Any comments, any questions? Patrick.
So, I struggle with the person that hit our car, right, with our kids. Right? For example, say forgive, I'm not out for revenge. But if I see this person in the grocery store, I don't have any inclination to go yell or throw things or whatever. But I also don't have any inclination to go up and have a pleasant conversation either. I would rather just shop over there, shop over here, and that's it. I don't know if that's still holding on to something, or if it's just, and this is not a person we've had contact with before, so it's not like, we were, whatever, co-workers or something.
So I think there's a difference between harboring bitterness against somebody and working through some feelings. I think, and this, I'm talking from a position of going through this myself. We were done wrong by family members. And I now see very clearly how God used that to separate me from an unhealthy situation that I was in and get me in. And God said, I don't want to provide for you in that way. I'm not going to allow unrighteous people to take care of you. I have another situation that's better for you. But for years, I'm talking years, until I was able to get to a point where I could look back and see that, I'm like, they stole from me. They stole food from my kid's mouth. They did that, and they didn't change. They're still the same person they were when it happened. And they came to me for help afterwards. And boy, I was noble and righteous, and I helped them. But then I hung up the phone, and I was like, when I talk about that false friend, I had one. I carried him around for a long time, and it ate me up, and it stole sleep from me, and it just. I'm not in a hurry to go spend time around someone who is still a bad driver, someone who's still unsafe. I'm not in a hurry to go spend time around a person who just, the human form of the tick that I was talking about before, that survives out of sucking the life out of other people, all right? I'm not in a hurry to go spend time around that person. When I see that person at holidays and when we talk online, I struggle to be gracious. You know, I try to act as if nothing has ever happened. But I can't tell you that their behavior doesn't bother me. It doesn't wear me out. But again, I've come to see God's hand and how He uses unrighteousness to get His people where He wants them. And she said key words. God taking care of it. God handling it. He has to be the righteous judge. There is justice, but there's also sowing and reaping that we see here on earth. God always has us reap what we sow, more than we sow, and after we sow. So if you're around long enough, that after starts to bear fruit in other people's lives, and they start to see what the result of their behavior turns into. And you get a chance sometime to see that too. And my struggle with that is to not rejoice in the iniquity of others, is to just say, Lord, I need your grace. I need your mercy. And so does that person. Give that person your grace and your mercy too, because I'm enjoying it. They need to be able to enjoy it too. This is hard. This is difficult. It really is. And I know it's kept a lot of us awake at times and robbed us of peace. But the only way to get that peace is to let it go, is to send it away and allow it to draw you closer to God. Allow it to give you a sense of gratefulness and appreciation for what it is that you've been given. And it always helps to have a very clear sense of self-awareness of how depraved you really are and how God has redeemed you, how God has given you access to His service, to purpose, to His quality of life, to His peace, His joy when we deserve none of it. And so when you begin to think at it from that perspective, it's healthy. Because that's the way we approach. It's not about me, it's about God. And this is His ministry, this is His labor, this is His work, it's His energy that allows me to do it. So He gets the credit when good things happen, and I get the blame for messing things up. Martin.
Just real quickly, I remember 20 years ago, I was working for a company, and the boss man told me to do a certain thing, and then come Friday, he wouldn't pay me. And I said, you're still for my family and for my kids. And he started cussing me out, and I said, okay, that's fine. So, I remember praying about it, and then, I said, Lord, take for him sevenfold what he took from me. And then,
You prayed the old prayer of imprecation, huh?
well, I mean, I said, Lord, he stole from me, this is for my family, my kids, and I remember come Friday, the guy said, man, just what happened to the boss? I said, well, what happened? He said, they broke in his van, they stole his camera, they stole his checkbook, and I went to them, to the boss, and I said, I'm sorry about what had happened. And he said, they took about $700. So they took about sevenfold what he took from me, and I said, I prayed about this, and God took that from me. It was a coincidence. Well, a couple of weeks later happened the same thing. I said, do you want me to pray about what we did about 2 weeks ago? He said, no, I'll pay you. So God, the thing that I learned is, I didn't do anything. He cussed me, I just didn't do anything, and I prayed about it. And I said, Lord, you do what you need to do. And he became a believer that God would do it. Although he was an unbeliever, I'm just saying I took no vengeance of my own. And I was sorrowful that he